The modern world does not use poison to kill you. It gives you comfort. It gives you a comfortable bed, 24-hour entertainment, hot water, and instant food, just like the things given to an animal before it is locked inside a cage. You think you are free, but in reality, you are only living inside a soft and comfortable prison. Arthur had everything: a high six-figure annual income, a penthouse apartment, a luxury car, and a respected position in society. But every morning when he looked in the mirror, he saw a man who was already dead inside. His mind had become weak, his ability to concentrate was gone, and every small difficulty caused him to panic. One night, after losing a major business deal, Arthur had a panic attack. His hands were shaking. He looked at himself in the mirror and angrily smashed the glass. That day, he understood that comfort and an easy life had paralyzed his mental strength and his mind. If you keep running away from discomfort and pain, even the smallest problem in life will break you. The very next day, Arthur made a decision that made his friends and family think he was crazy. He resigned from his job, emptied his apartment, and put his phone in a box and threw it away. He chose Mount Cronus, a high, brutal, and unforgiving mountain. There was no electricity here, no heater, no internet, and most importantly, there was no rescue team to help. When Arthur arrived at a small wooden cabin at the foot of the mountain, the temperature dropped to -10 degrees on the very first night. His body was used to central heating. On that first night, his bones began to shake. His mind was screaming inside, "Go back, you will die here. This is madness." But Arthur knew that this was not his true self. It was the weak man inside him screaming, the one who did not want to disappear. Day 1, 4 in the morning. To stay warm and build a fire, he had to chop wood. His hands were already covered in blisters. With every swing of the axe, intense pain ran through his muscles. In the city, he lifted weights at the gym, but this was a matter of life and death. If he could not chop enough wood, he would freeze to death that night. Here, choosing pain was not in his hands. Enduring pain was the condition for survival. When he finally started the fire, he realized that for the first time in his life, he had truly worked hard for something. But this was only the beginning. The mountain had not yet shown its true and terrifying face. The first 2 weeks were extremely painful. Arthur's body was constantly breaking down. The wounds on his hands would reopen before they could even heal. But the real battle was not with his body. It was with his mind. In the city, whenever he felt sad or anxious, he had 100 ways to distract his mind: his phone, social media, friends, or food. But on this mountain, he was alone with his thoughts. There was no noise, there were no distractions. And in that silence, all of his past fears, his failures, and the insecurity hidden inside him began to come to the surface one by one. The silence in his mind became so overwhelming that sometimes Arthur felt like screaming. He realized that modern people are actually afraid of being alone and facing the silence within themselves, which is why they constantly keep their minds busy with useless things. In the 3rd week, the mountain launched its first major attack. A powerful snowstorm hit during the night. The strong winds shook the wooden cabin so violently that it felt like it could collapse at any moment. The temperature dropped so low that the bucket of lake water inside the cabin froze solid. Arthur had 2 choices. He could curl up in the corner of the cabin and keep trembling in fear, or he could step outside and face the storm. He wrapped himself in warm clothes, picked up the axe, and walked out of the cabin. The world outside was dark and freezing. Every blast of wind struck Arthur's face like needles. But that night, instead of running away, he did something strange. He stood in front of the snowstorm and began screaming at the top of his lungs. He unleashed all his anger, all his failures, and all the frustration of his weak personality directly into the face of the storm. That night, he realized that when you stand directly in front of your greatest fear, the fear begins to lose its power. The next morning, the storm had stopped. The first rays of sunlight were falling on the snow. Arthur looked at his hands. They were covered in blood, but there was no fear in his eyes anymore. The weak man inside him had begun to die, and a new strength, hard as rock, was beginning to emerge. But his greatest test was still ahead. 2 months had passed. Arthur's body was no longer as fragile as it had been before. His shoulders had become broader, the skin on his hands had become hard like leather, and the restlessness in his eyes had turned into a deep and quiet seriousness. Now he bathed in freezing water, and instead of trembling from the cold, his body had become accustomed to it. But the mountain's moral test was still ahead. While living on the mountain, Arthur had created one rule for himself: no compromise on routine. No matter how severe the storm outside was, no matter how exhausted his body felt, he woke up at 4 in the morning every day, ran 10 kilometers, and carried wood down from the mountain peak. He had taught himself to stop working based on his emotions and mood. A task should be done simply because it needs to be done. Then, in the middle of the 3rd month, Arthur faced his greatest crisis. One day, while chopping wood at the summit, his foot slipped and he almost fell 100 feet into an icy ravine. As he fell, a wave of intense pain shot through his right foot. His ankle had twisted badly. It was an extremely dangerous situation. He had no phone, no first aid kit, and no one in the silent valley who could hear his screams. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and there were only 2 hours left before sunset. If he stayed there, his body would freeze solid by the next morning. This was the moment when the human mind either gives up or makes the impossible possible. Arthur took a deep breath. Instead of focusing on his pain, he completely silenced his mind. He pressed his injured foot into the snow to numb the swelling and pain, then began dragging himself across the snow using his hands and his healthy leg. Every inch of movement brought him unbearable pain. His entire body was soaked in sweat and snow, and his fingernails had been torn as he dug into the ice. His mind kept telling him, "Stop, we cannot go any further. Go to sleep." But he answered his mind, "If we are going to die, we will die fighting, not on our knees." After 3 hours of continuous struggle, pain, and suffering, when darkness had completely covered the valley, Arthur finally touched the door of the cabin. He opened the door, crawled inside, and collapsed onto the floor. That night, he had won the battle that 99% of people lose inside their own minds. After that terrifying night, Arthur spent the next 2 weeks inside the cabin healing his injured ankle on his own. There were no painkillers and no doctor. The pain was so severe that he could not sleep at night. But that pain gave him something extraordinary: total self-control. He understood that pain does not destroy you. Your fear of pain destroys you. 6 months had passed. The day had come for Arthur to leave the mountain and return to the world. He picked up his old clothes, the same clothes he had worn 6 months earlier. They were now loose on him because the excess fat on his body was gone, and his entire body had become hard like steel. When he came down from the mountain and entered the city again, the world looked completely different to him. The noise of the city, people rushing around, faces lost in their phones, and people panicking over the smallest things made him realize that he could never be part of this crowd again.
He sat down at a cafe. His old business partners and friends came to meet him. They had considered him dead for the past 6 months. They were stunned when they saw him.
Arthur's attitude had completely changed. There was no rush in his voice, no fear in his eyes, and he no longer needed to prove to anyone how successful he was. One of his friends asked, "How did you survive alone on that brutal mountain for 6 months? What did you find there?" Arthur placed the cup on the table, looked through the glass at the world rushing outside, and quietly replied, "I did not go there to find something. I went there to bury the man who was afraid of the slightest discomfort. The mountain did not destroy me, it set me free." The modern world tells you that an easy life is success, but the truth is that comfort kills the spirit inside you. If you want to take control of your life again, you also have to set fire to your comfort zone. You have to kill the weak person inside you and choose the challenge that burns you from the inside and turns you to ashes so that a new and unstoppable person can rise from those ashes.
The mountain is not outside you. The mountain is inside your own mind. Conquer it before it destroys you.